I thought I was just visiting my friend's house, but the way his mother looked at me, teasing with a smile, made my heart race in a way I couldn't explain. I hadn't planned on being alone with her that afternoon. My friend had stepped out for a quick errand, leaving me waiting awkwardly in their living room. I was scrolling absently on my phone when I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me, followed by the faint clink of ceramic. She appeared in the doorway, carrying a steaming mug in her hand. His mother. I'd met her a few times before, always in passing, polite greetings, a smile, nothing more. But today felt different. She wasn't dressed up, just comfortable in a soft knit sweater and dark jeans, her hair loosely tied back. Still, there was something about her presence that made the room suddenly feel smaller, warmer. "Didn't expect you to be here alone," she said, her tone light, almost teasing. She placed the mug down on the side table with slow precision, and I noticed the faint trace of perfume that drifted with her movement, floral, understated, but impossible to ignore. I stood quickly, a little too quickly, and almost stumbled over my words. "Oh, yeah, he said he'd be back soon." She tilted her head, watching me with an amused smile. "You look nervous." The words weren't sharp, but playful, as if she enjoyed pointing out what I was trying so hard to hide. Heat rushed to my face, and I tried to laugh it off. "Do I? Maybe I'm just not good at waiting." Her eyes lingered on me, steady and calm, and in that moment I felt exposed, like she could see straight through me. She crossed the room and sat gracefully on the arm of a chair, her posture relaxed, but her presence commanding. My pulse quickened without reason, every sound in the room fading until I was aware only of her. The silence stretched for a breath too long, and I shifted awkwardly in my seat. My hands fiddled with the edge of my sleeve, betraying me. She noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You don't have to be so tense," she said softly, the edges of her voice carrying warmth. "It's just me. Just her." But nothing about her felt ordinary. Even the way her fingers curled around the mug when she picked it up again seemed deliberate, graceful. My throat felt dry, and yet I couldn't look away. That was the first moment I realized how different she was from anyone else I knew, calm, confident, and somehow, effortlessly disarming. I sat there, trying to steady my breath, but the truth was clear, I wasn't just nervous. I was drawn in. She didn't let my nervousness slip by unnoticed. If anything, she leaned into it with a kind of playful ease, as though teasing me was second nature. "Come on," she said, motioning toward the couch. "Sit. You'll wear a hole in the carpet if you keep shifting around like that." I managed a smile and followed her gesture, lowering myself onto the edge of the cushion. She carried herself differently than most people I knew, unhurried, unbothered, like time bent around her instead of the other way around. When she sat across from me, it wasn't just sitting. It was a quiet kind of command, her posture straight yet relaxed, eyes focused entirely on me. "So," she said, leaning forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees. "Tell me. Why does a young man like you look as though you've been caught doing something wrong?" The words caught me off guard, and I let out a nervous laugh. "Do I really look that guilty?" She smiled, her lips curving just enough to show she was enjoying herself. "Not guilty," she corrected softly, "just uneasy. Like you're waiting for someone to judge you." Her tone wasn't harsh, it was gentle, but it held weight, as though she knew exactly what to say to strip away defenses. I tried to respond, but the words tangled. She tilted her head, eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. "Mischief, maybe. Curiosity. Or both." The silence stretched again, but instead of uncomfortable, it felt charged. She reached for the mug on the table, her fingers brushing against mine as she passed it. The touch was brief, barely a second, yet it lingered in my chest like a spark. Her eyes flickered down to our hands before returning to mine. She didn't apologize for the contact, didn't excuse it away. She just held my gaze as if testing how I'd handle it. I swallowed, my throat tight. Thanks. My voice came out lower than I intended, and she caught it. You're welcome, she said simply, but the way the words left her lips made them feel heavier, more deliberate than such a small exchange should allow. I took a sip from the cup, grateful for the distraction, though the warmth in my hands only reminded me of the warmth from hers a moment ago. She leaned back, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. You really are fun to talk to when you're flustered. Her laugh followed, soft and low, wrapping itself around me. And though part of me wanted to retreat, another part found myself leaning forward, drawn closer without even realizing it. For the first time, I understood, her teasing wasn't meant to embarrass me. It was her way of pulling me in, slowly, carefully, until I didn't want to escape it. The teasing slowly gave way to something gentler. Her playful edge softened as she leaned back into the chair, her eyes never leaving me. There was a pause, long enough for me to feel the weight of it, before she asked, almost casually, so, what about you? What are you working toward these days? It was such a simple question, yet it felt disarming. Most people asked out of politeness, but she asked as though she actually wanted the truth, not the polite version. I hesitated, running my thumb along the rim of the mug in my hands. I don't know if I have it all figured out yet, I admitted, my voice quieter than I expected. Sometimes it feels like I'm just drifting. Everyone else seems to have a plan. And I stopped, unsure why I was saying this out loud. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded slowly, as though she understood. That's not unusual, she said softly. You don't need to have everything in place right now. Trust me, most people older than you are still figuring it out too. The way she said it, with a steady warmth in her voice, made the knot in my chest loosen a little. I risked looking up at her, and the way she was watching me, it wasn't casual. It was intent, as if she saw past the surface and into the nerves I tried to hide. I laughed weakly, trying to cover the heaviness of the moment. You make it sound easy. Her lips curved into a half-smile. It's not easy. But it's not impossible either. She let out a small breath, as though something inside her had shifted. When I was your age, I thought I had everything figured out. And then life had other plans. Her voice dipped slightly, tinged with something unspoken. For the first time, she wasn't teasing, wasn't playing, it was raw honesty. I found myself leaning forward, forgetting my own nervousness. What happened? I asked carefully. She glanced away for a moment, her hand resting near mine on the table. Let's just say I learned the hard way that certainty doesn't last forever. People change. Circumstances change. And sometimes, you're left having to rebuild yourself when you least expect it. Her words carried more weight than she probably intended to share, but I felt honored she trusted me with them. Instinctively, I shifted my hand closer until our fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. Instead, her thumb tapped lightly against the table, so close that the warmth of her skin seemed to radiate toward me. The air between us had changed again, no longer playful, but heavier, more intimate. I hadn't planned to share my insecurities, and she hadn't planned to reveal her own. Yet somehow, in that quiet exchange, it felt like we had both opened doors we couldn't easily close again. Her honesty lingered between us, like a low hum neither of us knew how to silence. For a while, we just sat there, my eyes tracing the curve of her hand where it rested near mine, her fingers tapping absent-mindedly against the wood of the table. I must have been fidgeting again, pulling at the cuff of my sleeve, adjusting how I sat, because she noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. A small smile tugged at her lips as she tilted her head, studying me with that mix of amusement and gentleness I was slowly becoming addicted to. You really can't sit still, can you? She said softly. I froze, realizing my restless fingers were betraying me. Sorry, I muttered, dropping my hands into my lap. I don't even notice I'm doing it. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. That's because you're nervous. There was no accusation in her voice, just certainty. Then, before I could protest, she reached across the table and laid her hand over mine. The movement was simple. But the effect? Immediate. Her palm was warm against the back of my hand, her fingers relaxed yet steady, as though she was quietly telling me, "Stay still. Breathe." My pulse leapt so quickly I thought she might feel it racing beneath her touch. I looked up at her, half expecting her to laugh again, but her expression wasn't mocking this time. Her gaze was softer, though still direct, and she said quietly, "You don't have to be so tense around me. I'll help you relax." The words were teasing on the surface, but there was an undercurrent beneath them, something that made my chest tighten in a way that wasn't entirely nervousness anymore. I swallowed hard, but I didn't move my hand away. Instead, I let the weight of hers anchor me. Her thumb brushed lightly against my skin, absent at first, then deliberate. It wasn't a caress exactly, more like a test. A question without words. The room felt too quiet, every tick of the clock in the hallway magnified. My breathing slowed, my shoulders loosening without me even realizing. Somehow, her touch was both steadying and electrifying at once. She tilted her head again, her eyes flicking down to our hands before returning to mine. "Better?" she asked, almost in a whisper. I couldn't find my voice at first, so I simply nodded. And that made her smile, a real, unguarded smile this time. She didn't withdraw right away. Instead, she left her hand there, as if she wanted me to grow used to the feeling. And in that moment, I realized, she wasn't just teasing me anymore. She was opening a door, slowly, carefully, waiting to see if I'd step through. Her hand eventually slipped away from mine, but the warmth it left behind stayed like an imprint, impossible to shake. I sat there, staring down at my own hand as if it belonged to someone else. She leaned back in her chair, though not far, just enough to give me space, yet close enough that the energy between us remained charged. "You really are easy to read," she said lightly, almost to herself. "I can always tell what you're feeling, even when you try to hide it." I managed a nervous laugh. "That obvious, huh?" She smiled, softer this time, not teasing but kind. "Not obvious to everyone. Just to me." The air shifted again, gentler now, and I found myself drawn forward, my elbows resting on my knees as I searched for something else to say. But before I could fill the silence, she continued, her voice quieter, more personal. "You know, people always assume I have it all together. That I'm confident, certain, untouchable." She gave a small shake of her head. "But the truth is, I have nights when I feel just as unsure as you do. Just as lonely." I blinked at her, surprised. Her words carried a weight she didn't hide behind a smile this time. The thought of her, this graceful, self-assured woman, feeling lonely felt impossible, yet hearing her admit it made her seem more real, more human. I shifted closer without even thinking about it, the couch cushion dipping beneath me. "I wouldn't have guessed," I said softly. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I thought I saw the faintest shimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. "That's because I don't let people see it. Not often." Her hand moved slightly, brushing against my arm. It was a light touch, barely there, but it was enough to make me forget what I was going to say next. I felt the gentle scrape of her nails through the fabric of my sleeve, a touch so simple yet so intentional. I didn't move away. If anything, I leaned into it. The closeness was no longer something I stumbled into, it was something I wanted. Something that felt natural, inevitable. Her voice dropped lower. "It feels strange, sharing that with you. But for some reason, it doesn't feel wrong." I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "It doesn't feel wrong to me either." For a while, neither of us said anything more. We just sat there, her hand lightly resting against my arm, the warmth between us steady and unspoken. And in that silence, I realized we had crossed into something deeper, not playful, not accidental, but quietly, undeniably tender. The room seemed to grow quieter with every passing second, as though even the house itself sensed the shift between us. I could still feel the faint pressure of her touch on my arm, though her hand had retreated by now, resting loosely in her lap. Still, the distance didn't lessen the weight of what had just passed between us. She leaned back slightly, her eyes searching mine. It wasn't the playful teasing from earlier, nor the gentle reassurance of before. This was different. Measured. Intent. Her hair had slipped loose from the tie at the back of her head, a strand falling across her cheek. Without thinking, she lifted her hand to brush it away, but halfway through the motion her fingers stilled. Instead of tucking it back, she let them trail lightly along her cheekbone, then down, until the tips brushed against her jaw. My gaze followed the movement, caught before I could look away. When her eyes met mine again, she tilted her head slightly, as though weighing a choice. And then, almost imperceptibly, her hand shifted in my direction. Her fingertips grazed my face, just along the edge of my cheek, so faint it might have been accidental. But it wasn't. I knew it. She knew it. The touch was nothing more than a whisper against my skin, yet it sent a shiver running straight down my spine. I froze, breath caught in my throat. She didn't pull back. Instead, she let her hand rest there a moment longer, the warmth of her skin radiating against mine. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to move, to say something, to break the silence, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. The pause stretched, fragile and dangerous, as though one wrong movement could shatter it. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, steady and unflinching, though I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty in them too. For the first time, it wasn't just me who seemed nervous. She drew in a quiet breath, and I felt it on my lips, so close, so delicate, that the world outside this moment disappeared completely. I wanted to close the distance. My body screamed for it. But something held me back, respect, fear, maybe both. And she seemed to feel it too, because her hand lingered only a second longer before slowly, deliberately, drifting away. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Neither of us spoke, but the truth was there, hanging unspoken in the air between us. We had come close, so close, and stopped just short. That fragile, suspended pause carried more weight than anything else could have. And in my chest, I knew, nothing between us would ever feel the same again. The moment we almost crossed lingered like a phantom between us, neither acknowledged nor dismissed. Her hand had drifted back into her lap, but the memory of her touch burned against my cheek long after it was gone. I sat there, suspended between what I wanted and what I knew we couldn't quite reach. She was the first to move. With a small breath, she leaned back, her shoulders easing as though she had just decided something for both of us. A faint smile touched her lips, not playful this time, not mischievous, but gentle, tinged with understanding. "You don't need to be nervous around me anymore," she said softly. The words weren't teasing now. They felt like a promise, a reassurance. I nodded, unable to find an answer that matched the weight of her tone. All I could do was hold her gaze, feeling both steadier and more unmoored than ever. A clock ticked somewhere in the hallway, pulling me back to the present. My friend would be back soon. The thought should have made me panic, but it didn't. Instead, I felt an odd calm settle in, as though this strange, fragile closeness was something we could carry quietly between us. I rose slowly, setting the empty mug back on the table. She stood too, mirroring me. For a moment, we just faced each other in the stillness of the room. Then, without hesitation, she reached for my hand. Her fingers slipped easily into mine, a light squeeze grounding me in place. Her thumb brushed once, slow and deliberate, over my knuckles. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but it carried more meaning than anything else could have. "Next time," she murmured, her voice low, warm, almost conspiratorial, "I'll make sure you really relax." The words sank into me, half tease, half promise, and all I could do was smile. My chest felt lighter, though the air around us was heavy with unspoken things. I didn't want to let go of her hand, but she was the one to release it, gently, slowly, as though giving me time to carry the memory of it with me. When I stepped toward the door, I glanced back once more. She was still standing there, her expression calm, composed, yet her eyes followed me with a quiet intensity one wouldn't forget. As I walked out into the fading light of the evening, I realized something had shifted inside me. It wasn't about what nearly happened, it was about how deeply she had seen me, how easily she had reached past my nervousness and touched something real. And though no one else would know, I carried that truth with me, certain that nothing between us would ever be quite the same again.